Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. Events of the last few weeks have drawn attention in a very sad way to the fact that first responders are not just people driving by with flashing lights and sirens. They're family members who are dedicated to serving the community and the people they know and care for. One brave example of that was my nephew, Jason Arno, who has made the ultimate sacrifice as a Buffalo firefighter in the line of duty. Words cannot describe the appreciation that the Arno family has for the thoughts and prayers that have come through for Jason. In his honor, I'd like to do a show that will help you, the audience, better understand, in general, the role that firefighters have in our society today. With me to help in that discussion is longtime firefighter Tiger Schmittendorf. So now I'd like to welcome Tiger to the show, and we'll get right into it. What makes someone become a first responder as opposed to sitting behind a desk or working at an assembly line?
Well, we're certainly a different breed, right? And, there's the cliche that, firefighters are crazy because they're the ones running into burning buildings as all the sane people are running out, right? Yeah. But the reality is, whether you get paid for it or not, it's not a job, it's not an occupation, it's a passion, it's a calling, and it's a lifestyle. And it's a very interrupted lifestyle, right? I've been a volunteer firefighter for now 43 years. And I tell folks half-jokingly that the only thing Lori, my wife, can rely on me for is to be unreliable, right? It's the only thing I do consistently, and the pager could go off at any moment, and I'm out the door, and whatever I was involved in is also out the door, and you're on your way to somebody else's emergency, whether that's an emergency to others or not. It's certainly an emergency to them at that moment.
Well, for people watching, it's not all sirens and flashing lights and flames lighting up the sky. Yeah. I've been covering fires since day one when I started shooting news, and being near a burning building, you walk away from that and your hair smells like smoke and your clothes smell like smoke. It's dirty and grimy. You get covered with water, whether it's freezing out or 100 degrees out. Right. I mean, the conditions are not pleasant, to say the least. No, they're not. It's tough. It's tough work. Yeah. It's not all glamorous.
No, it's not. It's hot, dirty, smoky. Physically and mentally and sometimes emotionally exhausting. And honestly, I think that's what attracts many people to it, right? It is definitely not the ordinary. And whether it's extraordinary circumstances or extraordinary people, depending on how you look at it, those are the people who are drawn to those types of activities. And it's also enormously gratifying. It's almost indescribable. The feeling you walk away with when you've been able to make a difference, make an impact in an otherwise worse situation. And the reality of today is, we're going to less and less fires every day, and that's a good thing. But the majority of what we do is simply serving others, and that comes in so many forms, whether it's at a emergency, at a medical emergency, or just a public service call, or in the event that, a vehicle or a car does catch on fire. It's all about serving others. And I think at the core of it, that's what really draws people to that, because there's very few opportunities in any other setting that offer you the chance to have such a immediate, direct, and such a significant impact on other people's lives. You could be at the highest level of medical care training, but the highest level of care sometimes you will ever give is simply holding someone's hand and comforting them in, what they consider to be their worst day.
Well, you mentioned that you're going to less and less fires these days. Firefighting, for hundreds of years has evolved, and I'm not sure, maybe you can explain, over the last century, there's certainly been a lot of changes in the way fires are fought. in recent years, I'm not sure, but I assume that the technology and the techniques have accelerated in the way fires are addressed. Can you explain how things have changed?
Sure. Well, they've changed on both ends, right? In our ability, capabilities, and resources that we have to fight fires and communicate effectively with everybody that we need to be connected to. But also the fires we're fighting today are not necessarily the fires we were fighting 20 or 30 years ago. You know, you think of the changes in building construction as well as just the objects that we're putting in our spaces. You think of your overstuffed couch at home, or you know, the types of furniture and so forth. To a large extent, they're solid fuels, right? And so fires are theoretically burning not only hotter, but faster. They're accelerating faster. So when it comes to survivability in a fire situation for the occupants, that becomes critical. The same fire that may have taken or may have offered you 4 to 6 minutes to escape 20 or 30 years ago may offer you half of that time or less.
Well, you know, it's interesting because in today's society, there's so many regulations and so many rules about, you know, how things are constructed and the kinds of things you can buy. The safety is always a big part of the rules. The things,
Sure.
you know, and you think government is regulating things so that you're safer always. And so you would think that the materials that go into that couch and into the drapes on the wall and all that are more resistant to fire. Is that not necessarily the case?
Well, there's a big difference between the words resistant and proof, right? Fire resistant, fire retardant, and fireproof are totally different situations. So nothing is, you know, in terms of objects in our spaces are truly fireproof. So it's a matter of, it may take a little longer for them to ignite, but once they do, sometimes it's off to the races. So from a fire department standpoint, from a firefighter standpoint, when you think about early detection of the fire, notification to the 911 system, dispatching of the fire department, travel time and arrival, the cards are already stacked against us by the time we get there. So survivability of the occupants who are still in the space becomes even more challenging.
And, you know, when I was covering news, I would always, you know, show up, and then I was fairly quick to show up when the call came through for a fire. And it would always amaze me at how quickly flames normally, in a normal situation, flames would be put out. You know, it varied, but, you know, to a great extent, firefighters would show up and they would get to the heart of the flames quickly. Let me back up a little bit. There's a real science to fighting fires. When you get a call and you're dispatched to a fire, a lot of decisions have to be made. I don't know who makes those decisions and what the order of the decisions are made. I mean, it has to probably start when the call comes in. How does that process unfold?
And you bring up a great point. It actually starts well before the call ever comes in, right? It's familiarization with the district and the areas and the types of occupancies that your fire department responds to. Where appropriate, pre-planning for those, especially for large occupancies, whether it's just, you know, large open spaces and or high occupancy spaces such as, you know, nursing homes or high-rise buildings and things of that nature. So understanding the building construction, how long you could theoretically predict that it would last under deteriorating firefighting conditions, and the impact that both the heat, the flames, and also the water that we're going to apply are going to have on that building. You talk about residential fires, for example. Lightweight construction is the norm of today. So, you know, 30 years ago, your house, your roof may have been built using 2x12s or 2x10s or something similar to that, or heavy timber construction. And today it may be 2x6s or even 2x4s that are simply glued together on the ends. So those are built to fail, and they're going to fail a lot quicker than a house that was built, you know, decades ago. So all of that information is constantly going through the minds of everybody from the firefighter on up to the chief of the department, to the dispatcher, to the fire marshals, the inspectors, and everybody involved in the process. And that's simply called situational awareness. So we need to do everything within our power to maximize our situational awareness. Again, familiarization of knowing where we're going before we ever get there, so that we have an idea in our head. If I go in through the front door, where should the stairs to the second floor be located? I can look at the front of a structure and say, okay, is the kitchen to the right, the left, or the rear, and kind of predict based on typical residential construction. Large occupancies, whether it's a warehouse or a high-rise, something of that nature, it's going to be a different approach. So everything that we do is closely orchestrated and closely coordinated, coordinating both putting water on the fire, but just as important, if not more important, for survivability of the occupants is coordinated ventilation as well. So there's an awful lot that goes into it. Science does play a big part of it, knowing the fuels inside the building and knowing where we can most likely find occupants if they are inside the space.
And if I remember correctly, and I have years and years of listening to scanners, if a call came through and it was known that it was a school or a hospital or some kind of a building other than a residential, I'm not sure if this was a general rule. Maybe I'm just remembering Buffalo specifically, but depending on what kind of structure it was, it could be an automatic second alarm or an automatic third alarm because of the potential danger involved, like a school.
Sure, yeah, and again, that's based on occupancy load. So we're going to bring the appropriate resources as quickly as possible in hopes of not needing them, right? But it's better to bring them and turn them around or send them home than it is to get there and realize we need them and then there's a delay in their response. So that is why, and it confuses a lot of people, why do we send so many resources to what ends up being a automatic fire alarm that was set off in error or something of that nature. The reality is because we don't really know what's going on until we get there. And, it's the old phrase, objects in the mirror closer than they appear. So what you see from the outside and what you may see when you find, or what you may find when you get on the inside could be two totally different situations. There can be a lot of hidden dangers.
Okay, well, we're out of time for this segment. We'll be right back after these messages and interesting discussion. We'll get into some of the science of firefighting after we come back from this. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Tiger Schmittendorf, who's a longtime firefighter and expert on all things firefighting. We'll get right back into this.
Expert's a strong word for
We're talking about a little bit about the science of the profession.
Yeah.
When a call comes in and the trucks roll up to a scene and there's a fire, a working fire. It's like a war. The enemy is there. The enemy is the fire, and somebody has to be in control.
Right.
Somebody has to map out a strategy. How do you fight that enemy?
Yeah.
Who makes the call, and how do you attack? Where does that go?
So it starts with whoever the highest ranking officer is, or the officer in charge, who arrives first. They do what we call assumes command of the operation. So they're making both the strategic and tactical decisions and outline the objectives as to how we will attack the fire. Quite often in a hierarchy of a fire department, there's a higher ranking officer who follows in behind them, and they would assume command, take over, transfer command to that individual, whether it's a lieutenant, a captain, or a chief that has arrived at the incident. And they're making those decisions of whether or not we're, for starters, going to, send firefighters into the building, or are we going to attack it from the outside? Is it going to be a transitional attack where we start on the outside and work our way in? What are the immediate threats? what is the occupancy known or perceived of the structure, and the decisions that are going to be based on that. Our priorities in the incident command system are always in this order, and it starts with life safety, and that's the life safety of not only the people that we serve, but the people we serve with, our fellow first responders, and what level of risk or danger will we put them in. And then after that, it's incident stabilization. Are we making the situation better? Are we making it worse? Or is it simply staying the same? And we need to continue to address it. And then the third priority of that is property conservation. So what can we salvage out of the situation? Can we contain it just to the object of origin, the room of origin? Sometimes even just the building of origin is a win in those types of situations.
Well, I myself am a volunteer first responder, and as a matter of fact, about a week ago, I went through a training course for tactical combat casualty care. So it was a medical training course. And the people that I serve with, men and women, they, they're very, very serious about the information that we study and that we're exposed to. I mean, we can, joke around and laugh, and we can go out and have dinner or whatever, but when it comes to the training,
Sure.
they're very serious. Yeah. And I noticed that about all first responders, that everybody that I've experienced anyway, it's a brotherhood. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the firefighters. There's a general thread there that connects them all.
Yeah, absolutely. And however you refer to the bond as sisterhood, brotherhood, firehood, or simply family, it's a bond that, again, is almost indescribable, inexplicable, and tough to break, right?
And you're part of an organization that connects that brotherhood.
I am. And so I served for over 10 years as the director of the Hero Tribute Project for the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. The National Fallen Firefighters Memorial is located on the campus of the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And every year during the Memorial Weekend, where we honor fallen firefighters from the year before, my role was to interview the survivors, the families of the fallen firefighters.
Mm-hmm. It's not a very happy task, I'm sure. It's just it's physically and intellectually and emotionally draining. I can tell you that. I come away from those weekends, and Lori, my wife, is very savvy. She says you're like a sponge that needs to be wrung out, but she's good about giving me my space and allowing me to kind of let it dissolve in the way that it needs to dissolve. Well, in the events of the last couple of weeks, we see the tributes that come out. We see the brotherhood coming together to honor the sacrifice. It's quite moving, and I don't think there's anything like it in our society today that that can be experienced. It's sad, it's tragic on the one hand. On the other hand, it kind of gets your blood kind of going to realize how close and how serious this bond is.
Well, and I refer to it, I just have what's referred to as a challenge coin that I carry in my pocket. I refer to the Maltese cross as a universal symbol for instant acceptance, right? Firefighters are known for wearing this and symbols like it on pretty much everything that they own. I have drawers full of blue t-shirts with this symbol on it, and jackets and sweatshirts and hats and things of that nature. And if I'm walking down the street here locally or anywhere across the country or even the world, and I see somebody else wearing that same symbol or something like it, there's an instant connection. Introductions are not necessary.
Well, you've been associated with volunteer fire departments throughout your career. The society today has evolved. A lot of people say the youth of today doesn't want to be as active as they have been in the past. How are volunteer fire departments faring in today's society? Are they getting the help that they need, the volunteers?
Yeah, it varies by locale, certainly. It also, I won't lie, varies by how much emphasis the fire department puts on recruiting our replacements and training them, right? So that's important. So it takes a full team effort to build a bigger, better team. And there are certainly pockets around the country and even locally where they're really, really struggling and they need people to turn out. And there are other places that are thriving. And some of that is societal, and we have, less control over that. But being a part of your community in any setting is important to the livelihood of where you live and your neighbors. So it is literally a volunteering opportunity like absolutely none other. And I asked this question of firefighters and recruiters and folks alike, in what other setting can you literally knock down somebody's door and they'll send you a thank you card? If you cut a hole in their roof, they'll bake you cookies, right? I mean, it's almost, like I said, tough to describe. Just that bond and that just personal satisfaction that comes with helping others. There's absolutely nothing like it. And the action part of it and the team atmosphere, everything we do together as a team. And quite honestly, the adventure part of it, never knowing what the next call will bring us, is exciting, right? And not everything we do is exciting. Not everything is a working fire in a burning building and, a showstopper and something you're going to see on TV, but it comes down simply to helping our neighbors, helping our fellow citizens and helping complete strangers when they need it most. And just simply the appreciation that comes with that and the admiration that comes from our community is impossible to put a price on. So if you're looking for a tremendously rewarding opportunity to do things that you would never ever get to do in any other setting, certainly the fire service is a career, but especially the volunteer fire service serving in your community, where we're going to provide you with the free training, all the things that you need to be safe and successful.
You have
we're going to give you that.
A cartoon here that kind of signifies. Can you pick that up for a second and show?
Sure. This is a cartoon by a dear friend of mine and the most prolific artist in the fire service, Paul Combs. And it says, "This symbol owes you nothing, but if you dedicate yourself to it, it will give you everything." And that's, it's given me adventures, it's given me excitement, it's given me lifelong friendships. And some people in my life, I say we've been lifelong friends for well over 20 minutes, meaning that they're instant friends, right? And it can be, like I said, open up the key to cities, certainly the keys to firehouses, provide a meal, it's roadside assistance, it's childcare, it's everything you could ask for in probably the biggest family in the world.
Well, I know the volunteer work that I do is not fire related, but I know that the training that I undergo is no different than the full-time responders.
Right.
And I know for volunteer firefighters, it's the same thing. They get training that's just as good as full-time departments do. And it's the same training. It's basically, they're very well equipped and very well qualified to fight fires. It's a very professional operation.
It is, and professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. Right. My very good friend, past chief of the Snyder Fire District here in Amherst, Tom Merrill, actually teaches a class titled The Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And he talks about that it's more attitude, aptitude, and your actions that speak to your professionalism. And but you're right, the training is very similar. Sometimes it just takes us longer to get the same training because we're not doing it, 40 hours a week or so, back to back for 14 weeks. It's spread out over the course of several months or a year or even longer. But there's ongoing training, there's continual training, and you can never train enough for a job that frankly can bring you the risks and dangers and the threats to life that firefighting can. Well,
on a personal note, with the events of the past couple of weeks, the Arno family it's been a rough time, and I personally want to thank the firefighters and who've come from all over to pay tribute, and all of Western New York for the thoughts and prayers that have come in to support the family. We appreciate it. It's a very difficult time, but your help and support through this time helps us to cope, and I really appreciate it. And that's the brotherhood of the firefighters. It's something that we appreciate, the feeling that comes from all of you.
Yeah.
And so that
Absolutely,
I can't say
Phil.
enough.
Yeah. Well,
Beyond words, it's something that helps.
yeah, and certainly, you know, my condolences to you and your family, and Jason's extended family, and also to his fire service family. I say all the time, I personally didn't know Jason with just, you know, his short 3 years on the job, but I didn't need to know him because I know thousands more just like him, and what he brought to the profession every single day, and the lessons that he will bring forth in his legacy of service to his family, our families, and our community will not be forgotten.
Well, he was an example of your brotherhood, and I know he was dedicated to all that was good and honorable. Yeah. You know, that can be said without a doubt about him, and that's how he would want to be remembered, is to be dedicated to the honorable job that he did.
Absolutely.
And once again, thanks you to Western New York for all your thoughts and prayers. The Arno family appreciates it. I appreciate it. That's all the time we have for this program. Thank you for watching. My sincere thanks to all of you, not just for the big picture and WBBZ, but for my family. And we'll see you next time on The Big Picture.